Every story you have ever heard about Atlantis, every documentary, every sunken city movie, every map with a confident red X in the Atlantic traces back to exactly one source. Not a legend whispered down the generations, not an Egyptian scroll, not some sailor's tale that grew in the telling. One man, one philosopher, writing in Athens around 360 years before our era, in two dialogues, one of which he never even finished. No earlier text mentions Atlantis. No inscription, no other culture's records, nothing. Before Plato wrote it down, as far as any evidence can show, Atlantis did not exist. So before we go looking for the place, it is worth doing something almost nobody who looks for it ever does: reading what Plato actually said. The story appears in the Timaeus and the Critias. In them, a character named Critias recounts a tale he says came down through his family from Solon, the great Athenian lawmaker who lived 2 centuries earlier. Solon, the story goes, visited the Egyptian city of Sais, where an elderly priest told him, in effect, "You Greeks are children, you remember nothing." And then the priest tells him what Egypt remembers. 9,000 years before Solon, a vast island power lay beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we call the Strait of Gibraltar, an island, Plato writes, larger than Libya and Asia combined. This was Atlantis, a naval empire of staggering wealth, ringed harbors, and kings descended from the sea god Poseidon. Its capital was a marvel, concentric circles of land and water, bridged and walled, a canal cut clean through to the sea so warships could sail into the heart of the city. Plato describes it like a surveyor. The widths of the rings, the lengths of the walls, the dimensions of the great plain behind the city, all in tidy round numbers. Walls plated in bronze and tin, and the innermost in a metal he calls orichalcum, which glowed like fire and whose identity scholars still argue about. Hot and cold springs, groves of Poseidon. Even elephants. The island, he notes, supported elephants in great numbers. It is a complete world, rendered with the loving precision of an author who is very good at making things up. And Atlantis, says the priest, turned greedy. It moved to enslave the whole Mediterranean. One city stood against it, and one, Athens. Not Plato's Athens, but a primeval, ideal Athens, lean and virtuous and 9,000 years gone. And afterward came violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single terrible day and night, Plato writes, Atlantis sank beneath the sea, and the ideal Athens was destroyed along with it. Notice 3 things a treasure hunter never mentions. First, the hero of the story is not Atlantis. It is Athens. Atlantis is the villain, the bloated empire that fell to its own appetite. Second, the date and the size are absurd on their face. 9,000 years before Solon is roughly 9600 BCE, the era of Göbekli Tepe, when nothing remotely like a naval empire existed anywhere on Earth, and no island bigger than 2 continents fits in the Atlantic at all. Third, the Critias, the dialogue that describes Atlantis in loving detail, stops midstream, unfinished, just as Zeus is about to pronounce judgment. We do not even have the end of the story. So what was Plato doing? Here the scholarship is unusually united. The consensus among classicists, and it is a strong consensus, is that Atlantis is an invention, a philosophical fable, a thought experiment given a plot. Plato had spent the Republic designing an ideal state in theory. The Atlantis story shows that state in action, embodied by ancient Athens, tested against the perfect opposite, a superpower with every material advantage and no virtue. It is a morality tale about hubris, empire, and decay, themes Plato's Athens, freshly wrecked by its own imperial overreach in the Peloponnesian War, knew intimately. He even signals the construction. The tale is framed as a story of a story of a story, Critias recalling what his grandfather said Solon said the priest said. Among ancient writers themselves, Atlantis left almost no ripple. The geographer Strabo records the dry remark that its fate was to be invented by its author and then sunk by him, so it could never be checked. The irony is exquisite. Plato, who built the story to warn against confusing appearances with truth, has spent 2,000 years being taken literally. And for most of those 2,000 years, almost nobody did take it literally. Antiquity shrugged. The Middle Ages barely mention it. The story only began its second life after the Renaissance, when Plato came back into circulation, and the discovery of the Americas suddenly made lost lands across the ocean feel plausible. The modern obsession has a precise birthday, 1882, when an American politician named Ignatius Donnelly published Atlantis, the antediluvian world, recasting Plato's parable as suppressed history, the mother civilization behind Egypt and the Maya alike. Donnelly's method, mining the text for whatever fits and discarding the rest, is still the method of every Atlantis documentary on your recommendations page. The book has never been out of print. The parable became an industry. But, and this is where it gets genuinely interesting, invented does not mean made from nothing. Writers build from materials, and the Eastern Mediterranean handed Plato some remarkable materials. In 1967, the Greek archaeologist Spiridon Marinatos began excavating at Akrotiri, on the island of Santorini, ancient Thera, and found a Bronze Age Pompeii. A wealthy town with multi-story houses, plumbing, and exquisite frescoes, sealed under meters of volcanic ash. Around the late 1600s BCE, the radiocarbon work points to roughly 1627 to 1600, Thera erupted in one of the largest volcanic events of the last 10,000 years. The island's center collapsed into the sea, leaving the broken ring that tourists sail into today. Tsunamis battered the shores of Crete, home of the Minoans, the region's great naval civilization, the closest thing the Bronze Age had to Plato's Island of Mariners. Within a few generations, Minoan power was gone. A sophisticated island thalassocracy, humbled and partly drowned in a geological instant. Marinatos himself proposed that a folk memory of this catastrophe, filtered through 1,000 years and possibly through Egyptian records, is what reached Plato and became Atlantis. Some scholars add a closer, smaller spark. In 373 BCE, within Plato's own lifetime, the Greek city of Helike was destroyed by an earthquake and swallowed by the sea in a single night, with its dead exactly the fate Plato gives his island. It's a seductive theory, and parts of it are even testable. That's why we call it speculation rather than nonsense. The eruption is real, the date is real, the drowned town is real, you can walk its streets. What is speculation is the chain of memory. No Egyptian text about Thera reaching Solon has ever been found, and the famous arithmetic trick used to make the dates fit, that a scribe garbled hundreds into thousands so that 9,000 years should read 900, is pure conjecture, an elegant patch with no document behind it. The Thera hypothesis is the best raw material anyone has proposed. It is not a discovery of Atlantis. Nothing is, because a parable does not have coordinates. That has never stopped the searchers, and the catalog of found Atlantises is its own museum of human enthusiasm. Antarctica, the Azores, the Bahamas, Spain, Sweden, and lately the Richat structure in the Sahara. A striking ringed rock formation that is indeed circular and is also several hundred kilometers from the sea, in the wrong direction, with no archaeology in it. Every located Atlantis fails the same test. It has to ignore most of what Plato wrote, the date, the size, the location, the war with Athens, to claim the parts it likes. The text is treated as a treasure map with errors, rather than what it is, a story with a point. 2 millennia of expeditions have produced, as evidence for a real Atlantis, precisely nothing. That is worth saying plainly, because this channel's whole premise is that the genuine mysteries are better than the invented ones. And there is a genuine mystery here. It's just not underwater. It's this: why does this one story refuse to die? Plato wrote other myths, the cave, the ring of Gyges, the chariot of the soul, and nobody charters boats to find the cave. Something in Atlantis, the great civilization, the single cataclysmic night, the sea closing over everything, hooks into us at a depth philosophy cannot reach. Perhaps because it is not entirely foreign to human experience. Shorelines do drown, and cities do vanish. Akrotiri went under ash, Helike went under the Gulf of Corinth. And beneath the North Sea lies Doggerland, a real drowned country, plains and rivers where people hunted and camped for thousands of years until the melting ice raised the oceans and took it, slowly and then suddenly, around 8,000 years ago. Fishing boats still trawl up its bones, its antler harpoons, its flint tools. At the end of the last ice age, the sea rose by some 120 meters worldwide, and every coastal plain humanity had settled in 40,000 years of wandering went underwater. There is no Atlantis down there, but there are countless real places where someone's whole world drowned, and we are descended from the people who remembered. Plato reached for a story shaped like a memory his species actually carries. So, what did Plato really say? He said, "Here is a perfect empire, and virtue beat it, and the sea swallowed it, and the gods were just about to explain everything when the manuscript stops." He built a warning about pride so vivid that humanity has spent 24 centuries proving his point, by falling in love with the doomed empire and forgetting the warning entirely. Atlantis is real in the only way it was ever real. It is down there in the text, intact, ringed walls and all, exactly where its author sank it. The lost city was never lost. We just keep refusing to read the map.